to find a good doctor in a broken system is finding one where he or she acts against his or her best interest on behalf of the patient. We're all on a hunt to find doctors who rebel against the incentives that have been provided them to do the right thing.
Healthcare in America isn't just complex, it's chaos, with the information and power stacked against employers and patients. On Margin of Care, we set out to rebalance that scale. Today, I'm joined by Lee Lewis, the Chief Strategy Officer and GM of Medical Solutions at Health Transformation Alliance. HTA is a cooperative of businesses that are tackling healthcare differently, and its 70+ members insure more than 7 million lives worldwide. Lee spends a lot of time working with large employers, the Coca-Colas, the Verizons, the Marriotts of the world. But what really makes Lee fun to talk to is that in an industry where disruption is often treated like a dirty word, he actually embraces it. In this episode, we're going to break down a wide range of actionable strategies for how employers of any size can stop doing what everybody else is doing and start flattening the trend. Lee, welcome to the show. Many of our listeners have probably heard of HTA, but maybe just kind of diving like a layer deeper, like what are the main goals of the organization?
Yeah, sure thing. So excited to be here. We go out and visit with employers, and we're looking for a specific type of employer, one who is eager to try and get different results and is dissatisfied with the standard approaches, the standard advice, the standard vendors that they are using today. They almost always will say things like, I just don't feel like anyone is giving me good advice. I feel like I'm asking questions that nobody can answer. I feel like the way we've been doing things is silly, but everyone gaslights me saying, no, this is exactly how it should be. You're the same as everybody else. Just do it this way because that's how it's done. And you're a little weird for wanting to do it differently. And these employers, whether they be CHROs, VPs of total rewards or benefits, come to us because we have a totally different approach. We are aggressively trying to figure out what we can do differently, profitably, safely, with as little disruption as possible, considering that stuff that is new intrinsically comes with some disruptive risk, and trying to find the strategies and approaches we can use to absolutely get different results. And we have about 10% of our members every year are going flat trend for 2, 3, 4, 5 years without any cost shift, just by pulling waste and redundancies and inefficiencies out of the system and converting that into lower prices and affordability for their employees and families. And it's so exciting to see. We're saving well over $1 billion a year for our groups, which is thrilling. And if we're successful, it'll be a whole lot more than that.
It's kind of incredible when you think about these organizations saving tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars through what it is that you're ultimately helping them sort of transform with their benefits programs right now. Like the portion of an overall, revenue line that is being eaten up by benefits budget it's significantly accelerating across the country right now. You guys have appeared to sort of crack the code on that right now. But I think the percentage of large employers that are seeing like a +15, a +20 this year, it's just like significantly higher than what we've seen in the past based on renewal data. So you're keeping like budgets literally flat or just like low single digits. Is that a model that you think is duplicable across the country? What you guys are doing right now for employers?
I think so. It's modular. So there are a number of strategies that any employer can follow, almost any employer can follow, that will help to reduce that cost burden and get a better result. Some of those strategies will not work for some employers. And so it's not a perfect rule book where you must follow this particular set of circumstances in order to get a good result, but there might be 20 things you can do, and at least 12 to 15 of those should work for any employer.
You were using the term disruption, and for years, right? Like disruption was always this dirty word. Like, I don't want to do something that's going to create friction or noise within my population. I want to save money, but I can't eliminate my PPO. Like I can't take doctors out of the network. I can't push people towards certain doctors and away from other doctors. So when you think about, you've got 60, 70 clients as part of HTA, like what is the overall view on disruption? And do you find that within that book of clients in that portfolio of HTA member organizations, like, is there a pretty like wide continuum on just how disruptive certain organizations are willing to be versus the other companies?
Great question. We want to disrupt broken incentives, not families or people or employees. When you're doing something really new, there's always risk of it being disruptive. If you are able in your culture, in your unique culture, your organization, if you're able to tolerate a little bit more noise and change management, then you can move faster and you can do more things. But there are plenty of employers that have an extremely low tolerance for employee staff noise and disruption. And it might mean that we move a little bit more slowly and do extra communications, but we still do something that would be a somewhat disruptive change or difference. Yeah. In other scenarios, we'll just do less of a change, or maybe we'll forego a particular strategy altogether just because it would cause more noise than fits for the ethos of that company.
You've been very creative with these organizations. What were some of the outcomes from those types of more innovative strategies that you guys are sort of testing with some of these larger organizations?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple. One example is about 5 years ago, a lot of our employers were coming together and saying, we need to supplement our behavioral health network. We don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough psychiatrists, et cetera. So we approached the market. We found several partners that were all offering those advanced EAPs or supplemental behavioral health networks or therapist networks. And we said, okay, there's some great options here. Why don't we just use one of these? And the employer said, I can't use one of those. Why? The constraints are we want to be able to add a supplemental network, have it work through our carrier and through the existing ID card and everything else, and not have to replace our EAP, and that it pays fee for service, not a PEPM. There wasn't anything in the market that did that with those constraints. And so we went back out and we negotiated and navigated and collaborated with a number of these supplemental partners until we found one who was able to do so. We were able to get a supplemental network of 7,000 therapists who were not in network previously to now be in network. We were able to do that across a dozen employers with almost 1 million lives without any new PEPM or any other new fees. And it was just able to work in their health plan to help them get closer to full MAPIA compliance. Really exciting. A second example, it was employers saying, hey, we've got direct primary care doctors, DPCs or advanced primary care doctors in all these different cities. And we're getting phone calls from people in some cities saying, hey, there aren't any fee-for-service docs or there's no doctors in the network that are available, so I'm having to go to the ER and urgent care instead. Or they were saying, I found a doctor, but he or she does not take insurance. And so what am I supposed to do? Am I just paying you all this money out of my paychecks, and then I got to go pay cash anyway for a doctor anyway? Like, this was a real problem. Yep. So we approached the market. We found a billing service that was able to convert payments from insurance companies into value-based payments. And then we were able to go and find direct primary care providers all across the country, sync them into that. And we created the first grassroots, open source, full availability program where hundreds and hundreds of different DPCs have all opted in and been able to be used by the large employers. No venture capital needed, no big kind of funding mechanism or equity or any of those things. You can't buy it or catch and kill it because it's just a program that we put together that can work organically.
There just has been this lack of the appropriate number of behavioral therapists or psychologists, et cetera, that are in the medical networks. Like, you guys have solved a need to address accessibility, which is awesome. Like, taking this sort of leveraged approach with these large organizations to really innovate because nobody else was doing it. I think so much about what's innovated over the years is led by employers at the end of the day. Like, employers are the ones that are pushing the envelope. And are you finding that over time, because of the leverage of HTA, that these behemoth insurance companies are actually now becoming more flexible than maybe they ever anticipated that they were going to have to be?
The short answer is yes. We are finding that the carriers are becoming more flexible each year, and they're able to accommodate more of our requests. Part of that is due because we have large employers. We've got 40, 50, 60, 80, 100, 200,000 lives with our employers. And so that can clearly have enough buying power to push things in new directions. I worry that some of the breakthroughs that we're getting are only available for our larger employers. That is something that concerns me. I don't necessarily know that others in the marketplace are benefiting from some of those new flexibilities. I grew up in the TPA space. Those are my people. I love solving administration problems. That's one of my favorite things. And we encourage large groups who are doing a lot of really custom, interesting, creative things, or even more smaller groups who want to do the same, should absolutely consider getting a TPA, an independent TPA that is not just your regular insurance carrier, right? Your BUCA carrier. However, for probably 80, 90% of our large Fortune 200 employers, going to an independent TPA is challenging for one reason or another. And so we have simply accepted that, look, we're going to run a marathon in a parka. It's going to be harder, but that's just the constraints that we have in place. We need to figure out how to do transformative things. We need to find new ways to operate that still fit within our regular carrier. Quick example of that, direct contracting. It's been common logic that if you're going to sign a direct contract with the local imaging center or hospital, that you're going to have to get a TPA. That's just been acknowledged as sort of common belief, common dogma for decades, really, I think, right, as long as I've been in the industry. And so a lot of employers don't really think about doing a direct contract. Turns out that's a design problem. It's not a systems problem. If you do a direct contract with a hospital, but do it in an extremely simple way, where you and the hospital come to an agreement that you're going to process fee-for-service claims, and you're going to do it at a particular set of rates, a rate set or a fee schedule. Don't go for incredibly different prices, but maybe a little bit better pricing. And you don't necessarily add in a bunch of extra upside and downside risk or other additional performance guarantees or things that require actuaries to track it. When you get really creative in the direct contract, when it turns into an arts and crafts fair and you're sort of building something that no one's ever seen before, you're going to need a heavy amount of customization to administer that. Yep. However, if it's done with a simple fee schedule, that gives you the ability, you can actually use a direct contract with a standard carrier, as long as you've done the direct contract in a way that's relatively specific, relatively simple.
What I'm anecdotally seeing is that the carriers are sort of moving a little bit more into the willingness of being nimble, because they are getting pushed by large employers. Unfortunately, small clients just don't have the leverage that these jumbo employers do. But the guidance, it sounds like one sort of piece of guidance is, think about potentially, if you want to be more creative, you want the vendor to be more nimble, like it might be taking that step away from the traditional carrier and moving it to the TPA. What other advice might you have for small employers beyond thinking about moving to a TPA?
Everybody, I guess it's Homo sapien. We always look at what we don't have, and we tend to fixate a little bit more on that than what we do. My large employers think of them as steering an aircraft carrier, right? It can break through and get to incredible places, and it's got huge resources. But if you need to turn right or left, it is a ponderous exercise. Whereas a small speedboat can move quickly, swiftly, up ahead, off to the side, can change direction and pivot as the waves come. The large purchasing power employers look down at the speedboat and say, man, look, they can do whatever they want. They can move quickly. So what is it that a small employer can do? Small employers can communicate to their employees really, really well. That's super hard to do if you're running 200,000 lives in 2,000 cities. It's a lot easier if you've got 200 lives. And so you can communicate to them, hey, use this ASC across town, or use this one hospital, not the other one. That's incredible. A large employer to be able to have that kind of granular communication with their employees, nearly impossible, but a small employer can do it really easily. A lot of people think, oh, if I don't have as many lives as Boeing or Walmart or Google or whatever, I can't do a direct contract. Not the case. A small employer with 200 lives that's relatively concentrated in a town can absolutely call the local hospitals and say, hey, we're looking to do a deal with one hospital here in town, and probably send all of our employees to one place. Most hospitals are going to respond, at least 50-50. You're going to get a decent response on that type of a phone call, and you can negotiate a super reasonable price where you're offering to pay cash and pay quickly and to steer your patients there. That's a huge win for that hospital, even with a relatively modest number of people. What you gain from that is full transparency, the ability to talk to your supplier, better service, better communication and connectivity. You can audit all your claims and make sure that, not even audit, but just be able to reconcile your claims to know what you're paying for and how it's working. All of these things become available, and they're easier to do as a small employer than it is to do as a large one. But most employers don't even try because they figure, I'm not Walmart. I can't do a direct contract.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember I was on the consulting side before I came over to this side myself. And I remember 10 years ago sitting around a conference table during a utilization meeting with a client and with their health plan. And I was like, wouldn't it make sense, given the fact that this client has so much volume of membership in this city, that there's a health system that's actually represented at this table too? Are we missing one key stakeholder from this discussion as we're thinking about how do we actually manage costs and cost of care per episode? So I think over time now, this concept of direct contracting, and it sounds like you guys have had some success with actually having the carriers involved in some of the direct contracting.
The other thing that's great for smaller employers is, a smaller employer, you can put in place a transparency tool that helps to steer your employees and their families in your local city or town. You can do a plan design where you incentivize people to make good choices versus bad. The ultimate long-term strategy that gets jumbo employers and small employers alike flat trend for multiple many years is the guiding star we just call tiering and steering. And if you can identify where value exists in your community, this hospital, not that one, this ASC, not that one, try to refer to this doctor, set of doctors, not these. And then create an incentive and with both knowledge and some type of motivation for people to make the good decisions, not the bad ones. If we have enough employers in the United States in different cities and towns start doing that, we will hit a tipping point to where hospitals will have to ask, how do I lower my prices and offer better service and better outcomes so that I can attract back the patients I've lost?
In the Midwest, we've got enough clients now that are using our particular solution around identifying who are the top doctors, regardless of, logo on the hospital system, who are the best doctors across whatever subspecialty of care that they need. And they are being financially incentivized to go to see those doctors. And they're not getting that incentive if they see the other doctors. They still have access. They still have a plan design, but they're not getting the incentive. And what we're seeing happen and play out is, to your point, Lee, that care is starting to shift away from those doctors who are underperforming, that are skipping physical therapy and going right to surgery, that are using higher cost sites of care when there's lower cost sites of care that could keep the cost of the episode down. That utilization is starting to shift away from those doctors to the point where they're like, how do we learn about why we're losing patients because of this Garner thing? And then it really opens up the ability for us to get in and have a conversation with, did you know that this subset of doctors is not doing things based on clinical literature? And, they're making these site of care decisions. And by the way, their revision rates and their outcomes are less favorable than these other doctors. And then I think that's changing the discussion about ideally upping performance of doctors overall in that geography. So, it's aspirational for us to think about doing that at a larger national level. But I think what's really, really fun for me and for the organization is we're seeing that happen now on a micro level.
How do we get good communication and awareness into the hospitals and doctors that we're referring away from, so that they know why they're starting to see a downtick in patient volume and have the feedback to correct it? Because the one worry we have is, we're going to start steering people away and we do an okay job of it, and maybe the volume ticks down 1% and then another 1%, maybe another 1%. But the executives might look at that and be like, it looks like volume's a little bit down. Let's buy another billboard. How do we let them know that it's their behavior very specifically that's causing that to occur, and give them the feedback of how to fix it?
Well, it's funny. I think a lot of health systems historically actually don't agree. They don't agree, and they frankly find it untrustworthy the way that they've been evaluated in the past. They think that they've been evaluated unfairly. Their doctors happen to see sicker patients than their competitors.
Sure.
And
my patients are sicker than everybody else. It's not fair.
Yeah. As a result, they're being downgraded on the carrier's, tiering, and they don't get the special badge, et cetera. And, they just don't believe in the ranking methodology. Whereas if they actually felt like the methodology was treating them fairly and acknowledging that patient health it's not random, that they're seeing higher incidences of sicker patients that have multiple comorbid conditions, and as a result the cost of their episodes is being driven up, et cetera. And there's actually like good hard factual data on performance variation. I think like getting that in front of them and having doctors actually get on board with like, yeah, that method, we might not like the answer, but yeah, like that methodology actually is really fair, and we think it's a lot more accurate, and yeah, we get it. I think that's part of it, like getting the data in front of them. And I think there's a number of different mechanisms that can be used to get the data in front of them, whether it's us as an organization, like opening that door, whether it's actually leveraging the health plan or the health plans in that region to help us open those doors, whether it's employers helping us open those doors that are wanting to, that have a sizable population there, and sort of support organizations like ours to do that. I think those are definitely ways to do it. And I think it's important, like you guys are able to move a lot of innovative things ahead because of your volume. So as we think about this large employer that is actually launching us later this year, it's a full state of employees. It's the state government. Like suddenly we've got 10% of that population using our data to make a decision, and our incentives to make a decision on where they're going to get care, and importantly, where they're not going to get care anymore. Our hope is that does start to trigger enough, because it is a state government and this stuff's all public, that some of these systems start to lose the volume, and it's not just the 1% or the 2%. Maybe it's actually a huge shift, because suddenly a bunch of population in the state capital is no longer going to certain doctors or certain hospital systems. We do think that volume is actually a pretty effective way of getting that conversation to happen.
I think it's absolutely essential that we give feedback to the systems. If they don't know where they're messing up, and they don't know what the measures are that people are using, or worse, they don't even know that the local employer or employers are using some type of search methodology to steer. If they don't know that that's occurring, then they're not going to change their behavior the way that we would want them to, because they've never been held accountable in 50 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And actually, our perspective is that we could actually help health systems that are sort of struggling actually capture more commercial volume. That's going to be higher margin for them.
Wouldn't it be great?
There's ways that I think we're using our data that we could actually help their business, as opposed to take business away from them too. So, we've got a whole part of our business that's kind of focused on that.
We know that if we keep doing the same thing we've always been doing, we're going to get the same results. Therefore, logically, we need to do things that are new. New things always carry risk, because a new strategy or new approach to doing something is kind of like the new kid at a school. It has no friends. Innovation sits alone at the lunch table, and it needs somebody to give it a chance. And it's especially hard to do that if you're a large employer, if you're a jumbo employer.
You mentioned a lot in previous interviews. You've mentioned that there's these 5 buckets of health plan strategy. There's orthopedic, there's maternity and fertility, cardio-metabolic, cancer, and then behavioral health. And that makes up about half of employer spending right now. As you think about, putting yourself in the shoes of a benefits advisor that's listening in here, or an employer that's listening in here, what should they think about as they're crafting strategy around sort of those 5 buckets or those 5 pillars?
There's a few ways to tackle it. So the first one that you've just hinted on here is the clinical. So the first stage of orthopedics, we know that half of all the orthopedic surgeries that are happening today are unnecessary. The problem is we don't know which half. You can put in place a little more rigorous second opinions. You can implement centers of excellence to help with surgeries, so that hopefully if we do get a surgery, that we can get with a surgeon that's going to do a good job at a low, reasonable price, and hopefully not do a surgery that's unnecessary. You can put in place step therapies around physical therapy or other more conservative care to evaluate and work with patients prior to going all the way to a full surgery. It's kind of like if you were running a fleet of vehicles and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, my car won't start. I need you to replace the car." It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's be logical about this. Does it have gas? Did we change the oil? Is it got a dead battery? Like, there's a few different things that might be occurring that would prevent the car from operating. Let's not just jump immediately to replacing it completely. And if we think about a bum knee, jumping straight to a knee replacement may not be the right thing. There's a lot of things that could be causing chronic pain. Let's look at them conservatively before we jump to the most extreme. That type of diligence doesn't exist today. The second is in cardio-metabolic disease. I love this. The best published practice on cardio-metabolic disease, it's been around for 20 years, says that all the cardio-metabolic diseases that we have, let's focus on heart disease, kidney disease, and disease of the pancreas or diabetes. Those are actually, even though they're all separate systems, they're extremely interrelated. If there were poison that were dropped in a river and it killed the frogs, the fish, and the forest, you wouldn't call in a frog expert and a fish expert to try and solve the problem. You've got a poison in the river problem, and you need to treat it at that source. Today, the poison in the river is getting toxicities from bad diet, bad kind of lifestyle into our circulatory system, and it beats up and hammers out the pancreas. That gives you diabetes. If you keep going, it'll hit the heart. There's your heart disease. And if you live long enough with both of those, you'll get the kidney disease. You got two kidneys, so they go last. But that's all the same disease, and they shouldn't be treated in a silo. You should be given medication that could treat and protect all three organs. And if we do that, we get 70, 80% lower blindness, fewer amputations. You've got heart attacks drop by 75%, strokes drop by 70%, all-cause mortality drops by 82%. It's significant improvement. Then you have cancer. With cancer, there's a few things. It's one, making sure that we've got the diagnosis right. Similar to the orthopedic, you want to get the right, ideally you want to get a good second opinion. Second is we want to pay the right amount for the right dosage on whatever the infused drug, usually chemotherapy, is. And third, we want it to be going into the right location, the right venue, so that we're not overpaying facility fees. With behavioral health, we just need access. You need good access for low acuity behavioral health. If you can make that really open, accessible, and available, then people will have a pressure release valve that allows them to work through their problem before the boiler blows. In addition to that, some of the most potent therapies that exist in mental health, even curative mental health therapies that are getting 60, 70% resolution on alcoholism, treatment-resistant PTSD, treatment-resistant depression, and other major addictions and long-term behavioral health problems. The new therapies that are coming out in order to address that with stellate ganglion block and TMS and ketamine, and now new psilocybin, and Texas just passed a $50 million incentive for ibogaine. These new therapies, once they are FDA approved and accessible, it can still take years before they can file through as just a regular claim. Employers have ways of being able to shortcut this by adding a center of excellence network that makes these focused capabilities available. Examples like Enthea and others. Any employer can sign up for this and be able to make these therapies available. Finally, within maternity, the one thing is to make fertility even just partially available to any person who needs it, who's trying to start a family. Because if they don't, they pay cash and you end up doing very high risk, more aggressive therapies in order to get pregnant. And 1 in 3 of those that succeeds can end up with super high risk twins and triplets. So getting lower cost counseling and assistance for people who are trying to do family forming to help them get conservative care to start having a child is so much better. In addition to that, I think that birth centers are a real opportunity. They're not for everybody, but maybe 1 in 10 pregnant mothers might be open to that, but fewer than 1 in 100 have babies at a birth center. And if we can make those available to people, you get better outcomes at half the cost. It's a great deal for those people who would be a good fit.
Unfortunately, patients don't have that level of information to be able to kind of shop for doctors within a given system. They think going to a particular brand name logo is the right way to go. And they don't really appreciate that one doctor down the hall from another doctor might be doing things completely different. And like, hey, maybe nobody could argue that knee surgeon is really good and really successful and does the knee surgeries for pro athletes. But at the end of the day, like, does that need to be a knee surgery? Or is there an opportunity to save a whole lot of money and ultimately save a whole lot of time away from work when it really should be physical therapy based on clinical literature? Our data showing the amount of like individual doctor decision differences and outcome differences and site of care decision differences, et cetera. It's really remarkable, but can have a huge impact on cost for employers, on quality of life for employees and for their families. It's just about like, how do you actually get that information into the hands of people when they're just used to asking their family for advice or their neighbors or reading the billboard, like you said.
Families, neighbors, and billboards.
Conversation too.
Maybe if we're lucky, they have a good primary care. This is a really good point. I commented about how you could tackle each one of those conditions in a silo. The more elegant answer that gets all of them simultaneously is get people really good primary care with a relationship of trust, anchored in information to help them steer into doctors who use restraint and wisdom to only apply the minimum necessary amount of healthcare to get someone well. And that restraint, it's kind of funny. It's to find a good doctor in a broken system is finding one where he or she acts against his or her best interest on behalf of the patient. And so we're all on a hunt to find doctors who rebel against their own best interest and the incentives that have been provided them to do the right thing. And we should do everything in our power to try and get people to those doctors. Agreed.
Just maybe shifting gears a little bit. So Lee, you've got your own pod. It's called Broken Benefits. Everybody should go check it out. You've done a ton of fantastic interviews. If you had to pick, who was a standout guest that you had on recently and why?
Yes. So one that I love with Rich Crutch and Bill Allen, who are former CHROs at Macy's and McDonald's, and talked about how you can adjust the talent on your teams in order to create a culture that embraces innovation and can do great things. Another one with Deb Kaplan, also a CHRO, visionary CHRO, talks about how she would hire engineers and mathematicians and put them into benefits in order to get massively outsized results by embracing people who are really smart, but don't have a lot of the cognitive biases that might normally be present.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Great problem solvers, probably very, very focused on data and being able to really like unwind really actionable insights. But you're right, like not carry some particularly experiences or biases from being in HR for their entire career. That's a fascinating approach. I'll end it on this one, Lee. So with your background, you mentioned being at the TPA, working with Gallagher, doing the innovation lab thing, coming over to HTA. What do you wish that you knew before getting into benefits and sort of this healthcare space?
Behave differently than everybody around you. When we are in a system that is totally broken and that is systemically getting horrific results, just way too expensive, we don't live long enough, we don't have the outcomes we want, we have massive variability with social determinants of health, everything in the system is kind of broken. And so no matter where you sit in the system, you've got to be doing things against what is normal.
If you're liking the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you've been enjoying Margin of Care, please leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you've got feedback or questions or something you'd like us to cover on the show, send us a note anytime at marginofcare@getgarner.com. We'd love to hear from you.